Senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, so often when you hear folks speak in Washington, it sounds like we're only speaking to ourselves because most people around the country simply cannot understand what we're talking about when it comes to tax reform. We talk about repatriation and going from a global system to a territorial system and preventing inversions and the number of cohorts on the individual side and pass-throughs and corporate cuts. And talking about static scores versus dynamic scores. Too often, too many of us speak in a language that no one truly appreciates or understands. From my perspective, tax reform is really about two very simple pillars. The first pillar is how do we increase the take-home pay of the average person in this country, and how do we make sure that the jobs of the future are created here in the good old U.S. of A. Mr. President, I was privileged to grow up in a home with a strong, powerful, optimistic mama. She raised two boys on her own. And I will tell you that when you think about the challenges of single moms today, I think about the one that raised me. I think back to the times when she was working 16 hours each day, 3 days a week, and 8 hours a couple days a week. And she was a nurse's aide. She wasn't an LPN. She was not an RN. She wasn't even a CNA. She was simply a nurse's aide, which means that for several hours each day of her shift, she changed bedpans. She rolled patients over. And so when I think about the average single mom with a couple of kids in the household whose average income today is less than $36,000 a year, I think to myself, how are we going to make sure that that single mother takes home more of her hard-earned money? Tax reform is the fastest way for us here in Washington to actually translate our activities to that household. See, if we take less out of her paycheck, she gets to take home more of her money. Some have joked about the fact that I said, hashtag keep yo money. Why did I say that? Well, it's the way we speak at home, number one. And number two, it simplifies and crystallizes who we are talking about. We are simply talking about single moms like mine. We're talking about folks who work hard every day, strapped, challenged, with very little margin in their schedules and even less in their paychecks. The average American, I heard, somewhere around 50% of Americans do not have $500 in their savings account. When we are talking about tax reform, we are talking about increasing the margin for a family. The second major pillar of tax reform is simply making sure that the jobs of the future are created here at home. Well, simple question, how do you do that? The answer is even simpler. When you look around the globe, you find very carefully and critically and simply that there are countries who have a tax rate on their business production around 12.5%. The competition for countries like ours, they say the OECD, high-income countries, there are about 39 in there, the average tax rate is 22%. Our corporate tax rate is 35%. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that the difference between 35 and 22, yes, it's 13%, but more importantly, it's fewer jobs created here at home. This is a problem that we should solve. We solve that problem by making sure that our corporate tax rate is competitive with our global competitors. Common sense, some would suggest. I would suggest they're right. But not only that, whether you are on the left or the right, economists on both sides, and our current president, Trump, and our former president, Obama, agreed on one thing. Now, we should all stop and celebrate when we have agreement on both sides. They both say that the corporate tax must come down because a part of who pays the price of the corporate tax are the workers. Some have said 25% of the corporate tax is paid by workers. Others have said it's 80%. Here's what we know. Our workers in this country take home less of their money because our corporate tax rate is too high. We can do something about that. So, Mr. President, when we talk about tax reform, when we talk about the importance of inversions being eliminated and satisfying the need to grow our economy, let's keep it simple. Let's talk about moms and dads, like mine's single mom, income under $36,000. Can we make sure she takes more of her money home so she can take care of her 2 kids? The answer is yes. And we should do that ASAP.